Hear the Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Mark. Jesus talked with him, Peter, James and John, and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings for you, one for Moses and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice. "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. This is the gospel of the Lord. When I was young and hot-headed and stupid, I went down to the Isle of Wight with some friends. And there's some really high cliffs at one end of the Isle of Wight. There's a down there known as Tennyson Down, and there's a kind of memorial thing on top of it, kind of big, block of stone with stuff written on it. And it gives the height of the down, 484 feet or whatever it was. And not far away from there is a cliff, which presumably is about 400 feet high, give or take. Anyway, me and a friend were on Tennyson Down once. We'd just ridden there on a motorbike, so we're in our leather jackets and our boots and our jeans and all that kind of thing. And we looked down from the cliff and we saw the sea and we thought, gosh, the sea looks pretty, let's go down. So we started to climb down. And my friend found this kind of gully thing which went down the cliffs, which were made of chalk. And if any of you have ever tried to climb chalk, you know chalk is soft and crumbly and falls apart when you touch it. And I didn't. I found a different way. And the way I found an overhang. And so I got to this overhang and thought, oh, I can't go any further. And so I sat for a while. And as I sat, I looked down at the sea sparkling in the sunlight. And then I thought, I think I need to leave. And as I shifted, I slid. I was sitting on a very steep slope made up of bits and pieces of plants and what you might call pea gravel. And every time I moved, I slid closer to the edge. Now, I wasn't quite at the top, so it may not have been quite 400 feet high, but it was definitely more than 300. It was very high. And I thought I honestly was going to die. And it was a very strange feeling, because I thought, I'm about to die and no one's even going to notice. I could see a boat out on the water and I thought, he doesn't even mind. And I saw this helicopter overhead and I thought, they don't even realise I'm about to die and there's nothing I can do. And I called to my friend down on the beach. And he's a long way away, so it took quite a while before I could make myself heard. And he turned around and looked up at me and then he started laughing and pointing at me because he could see that I was stuck. And so he climbed up and he said, "Oh dear, you are stuck, aren't you?" So I said, "Yes." The reason I mention this is not because it's particularly like the Transfiguration, although the sunlight sparkling on the waves was quite bright, but it's one of those memories that just stuck vividly in my mind, that I could almost be there to this day. And I think for Peter and for John and for James, this was one of those memories which stuck vividly in their imaginations for the rest of their lives. Peter actually refers to it in one of his letters. He says, "We were there on the holy mountain and we saw the heavenly glorious splendour revealed," and all this kind of thing. You know, I was there, says Peter. I saw it. And Mark wasn't there, but he was a friend of Peter, and Peter must have relayed to him what it was like. And Mark writes this down, this memoir from Peter, who was there. Matthew and Luke put it slightly differently. So, I don't know if they asked James or John, because they refer more to the face of Jesus, how his face was shining. Whereas Mark refers to his clothing whiter than any human could bleach it. I mean, this is fairly white. Presumably he was whiter than white. He was like an advert for some washing powder. He's like, you know, when sometimes you put on a shirt in a club or something and it glows in the dark almost because there's certain types of light. Maybe it's like that kind of effect, it just kind of glowed. But this was no ordinary earthly glow. This thing which just stuck in the mind of Peter and James and John for the rest of their lives was this flash of heavenly splendour, this majesty, this glory of heaven, this breath of heaven. And if you read the scriptures and you read other parts where people have seen this kind of thing, it's done as a kind of heaven breaking through into the world. At the resurrection, Matthew talks about how an angel rolled the stone away from the tomb, and it said his garments shone like white and his face was like lightning. And he spoke to them. But that was an angel. That wasn't Jesus. And I actually looked through the scriptures looking for this kind of thing, and there are not many passages like this. But there are one or two events which are kind of similar. In one of them, Moses went up the mountain. And it was the time when he had come down, he'd smashed the law because the Israelites had been bad, and Moses was sick of the whole thing, and he said to God, you know, why did you do this to me? Why have you given me this to do? And, you know, they're discussing these things. But while Moses went up the mountain the second time, it says the cloud came down. And Moses said to the Lord, show me your glory. And the Lord said, no one may see me and live. No one may see my face and live. But, he said, I will cause my goodness to go in front of you, and I will call out my name. And we've referred to that at times in the past. But Moses was up the mountain, and he didn't see the Lord's face. He heard the voice. He was surrounded by the cloud of the presence. But he did not see the face of God. And there is another story which is somewhat similar. There's Elijah. If you remember the story of the prophet Elijah, he went up Mount Carmel. He challenged the prophets of Baal. He said, let the God that answers by fire, let him be God. And the prophets of Baal said, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. And it said there had 400 prophets of Baal, and they both made their sacrifices, and Elijah called to the Lord, and the prophets of Baal called to the Lord, and the prophets of Baal called to the Lord. Elijah didn't call it initially. And it said that they gashed themselves. They said they sliced themselves to make themselves bleed. They were drumming, they were singing, they were shouting, they were running around. And Elijah started to mock them. He was saying, well, but maybe he's asleep. Maybe he's drunk. Maybe he's on the toilet. And although you might think, what a stupid thing to say, the legends about the gods at that time actually did have that kind of thing. If you read the story of the Canaanite gods, the gods used to get drunk, and then they'd sleep it off, and then they'd wake up with a hangover. They're very kind of human in that respect. So that wasn't actually quite as stupid as you might think. But obviously it's ridiculous. If God is God, of course he's not going to be drunk. Of course he's not going to go to the toilet. I mean, what kind of God does that? And so Elijah was teasing them. And then it says he took water. Now remember, this is after a 3.5-year drought. And the whole land is thirsty and dry and hot. And he took water and he poured gallons of water over the sacrifice he had made. Over the stones, over the wood, and over the meat on top of the wood. And he called on the name of the Lord, and fire came down from heaven. And it said it burnt up everything. It burnt up the sacrifice, the wood, the water. Everything disappeared, and the stones were heated and cracked in the fierceness of the heat. There was no doubt which one actually worked. And immediately after that kind of showdown, Jezebel, who was the queen at that time, threatened Elijah, saying, if you don't sort of run away, I'm going to do for you more. And Elijah, for some reason, panicked and ran. And he ran out to the middle of nowhere, and he just lay down and said, I'm fed up, I've had enough, I want to die. And it said an angel came to him, gave him something to eat, and he slept, and he woke up, and he ate again, and the angel said, come on then, we've got to go. And it said on the strength of that food, he went all the way to Mount Horeb, which is where Moses went. And while he went up there, the presence of the Lord came down again. And that's the famous one where he's hidden in the cave and he hears the thunder and the lightning and the earthquakes and the wind howling and all these things. And then it said there was a still small voice. And he covered his face and went out. And he said, Elijah, why are you here? And again, Elijah did not see, but he heard the voice. And so here, on top of this mountain, Jesus appears with Moses and Elijah. Both of them had been up the mountain. Both of them had heard the voice, but neither of them had seen the face. Together they might, if you like, be examples, or if you like, stand for the law and the prophets. Everything the Israelites had heard and seen until that day could be summed up in the law and the prophets. And there was Moses and Elijah. Elijah the prophet, Moses the giver of the law. Standing with Jesus. They saw the face that they had never seen before. And it said, and Jesus shone. His garments shone like no one could make them white. And then they hear the voice. The cloud comes down. Listen to him. And then when the cloud is gone, they lift up their heads and it's back to normal. Jesus looks ordinary again. But Jesus hasn't changed. He was always there. There's nothing new about it, except that now they have seen another aspect of him. They have seen him as he is. When you hear about these stories about the demons looking on Jesus saying, away from me, what have you to do with us? Maybe that is what they could see. Because the people around, all they saw was the man, the carpenter from Nazareth. But the demons didn't see that. The demons saw something else. They were terrified. And now maybe Peter, James and John had a glimpse of what those demons saw. And they were also terrified. But they were not being threatened. The Father said, listen to him. This is my Son. This is the face which you can see and live. This is greater. This is more than the law and the prophets. This is what the law and the prophets spoke of. This is what the law and the prophets were heading to. This is the completion and the fulfillment of everything. This is the Son. Listen to him. And as you think about back to the Old Testament, about Moses and Elijah, the great figures, these pillars of the Old Testament, this event points back to them. But this event also points forward. It may, if you like, point forward to the resurrection, because it says in the Gospel of Luke that they were talking about the exodus, the departure, the exit, which Jesus was about to bring about in Jerusalem. In other words, his resurrection, his conquest over death, which he was about to bring about. Because this event is the first event in a series of things which build up to the Passion, which is why it's now in the church calendar. Because we're building up to Easter. We're looking forward to Good Friday. And this event happened on that build-up. As Jesus went down to Jerusalem, this is what happened on that journey. So he is preparing himself for this, and he is preparing his disciples for this. And he said to them as they came down, don't tell anyone about this until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. And it says later on in the Gospel of Mark, what's he talking about? What does he mean, raised from the dead? What does that mean? It made no sense to them. It made no sense because they didn't expect someone to die and then get up again. That doesn't happen in real life, as far as they were concerned. That's not normal. That's not what they were expecting at all. And they were just confused by what he said. And yet the Father had just said, listen to him. Those words must have been burned in their memory for the rest of their days, as did that sight which they had seen. But although this is pointing forwards to Jesus rising from the dead, I think this is also pointing forwards to when Jesus comes again. Because one day he will come with the clouds, with power and great glory. He will come in the heavenly splendour, and everyone will see him. Everyone will see that heavenly splendour. Because when Jesus comes again, he will not come as a servant as he did before, dressed in ordinary clothes, with an ordinary face and an ordinary job. If there's one thing that marked out Jesus and his family in that time, it's that they were ordinary. They were nondescript. They were unremarkable in just about every way. But when he comes again, he will be completely remarkable. He will be clothed in the heavenly splendour. He will be radiant. He will be glorious. He will be filled with majesty. And everyone will see him as he is. Everyone will see that splendour. So Peter and James and John saw that splendour. They had a snapshot, a preview of what everyone one day will see. They caught a glimpse so that they would have a better understanding of all these things as they happened. Because Peter had just said to them, Jesus said to them just before this, "Who do people say that I am?" And Peter said, "Well, some say you're Moses, some say Elijah, some say you're the prophet, you know." And Jesus said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter said, "You're the Christ, the Son of God." That's when they saw this. They saw Moses and Elijah, but they saw the Christ, the Son of God. And as I was talking about this thing with someone just recently, was saying, well, this story is something we need to remember. Not just so we have an explanation which says, oh, well, there we are, that's it, we can move on from that now. But so that that story sticks in our minds and we remember it. So that that story becomes part of us. So that as we recall that story lives in us in some new way. So that somehow something in us is changed by that knowledge, by these words. So that we are changed, so that we're shifted towards that heavenly splendour, towards that which the Lord will make us, towards heaven itself. So that we wait with expectation to see him when he comes again. And in the meantime we will remember that we speak of the Christ, the Son of God, veiled in flesh. As Paul says in the reading from 2 Corinthians, even if the gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. Everyone around couldn't see Jesus as he is. It says, in their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light. For we do not proclaim ourselves, we proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord. Let the light shine out of darkness. Let that light shine into our hearts. Because one day, we with unveiled faces will see that glory. We will see it. And in this everlasting hope we remain, knowing that he is the Son of God and he will come again. Last week we heard how John said, we have seen his glory. The glory is of the only begotten Son. What exactly was he speaking about? I've said before that I think that the epitome of that glory, the glory that Moses did not see, the glory of the Lord is that he is merciful and gracious, and that he is upright, that he is truthful, and that he is just. That he is utterly truthful and utterly just. He will not acquit the guilty. He will not permit wrongdoing because he is holy. But it is his glory to be merciful and to be gracious. And this paradox is seen on the cross where Jesus dies for the justice and the righteousness and the holiness of God. to show us grace and mercy. This is his glory. And it is his glory that we will see him again, clothed in this heavenly splendour. And these things have to be remembered alongside that the Son of God became flesh and dwelt among us, that he offered himself for our sins, that he will come again with the cloud and with the splendour of heaven, that this is the Son of God, that we must listen to him